In the busy city of Enugu, Ngozi was known as a hard-working and gentle young woman. She loved her husband Obinna with all her heart, and for her, marriage meant standing by him no matter what life brought. When Obinna's business began to fail, many people whispered that he would not survive the pressure. But Ngozi never joined the whispers. She believed in him completely. She told him every day, "Don't worry, my love, I am here with you. We will rise again." Slowly, she began giving away her own treasures just to keep him afloat. The gold necklace her mother had gifted her on her wedding day was sold quietly at the market. Her small savings, carefully put aside for emergencies, disappeared into paying his debts. Even her personal comfort no longer mattered. She would walk long distances to save money for transport, just so Obinna could have more. Her friends noticed her struggles and often warned her, "Ngozi, you are giving too much." But she would only smile and answer softly, "He is my husband. He is my protector, my strength. If I don't stand by him now, when will I?" She carried her pain like a secret, hiding her tears at night and putting on a brave face in the morning. In her heart, Ngozi believed love meant sacrifice. She thought one day Obinna would look back and say, "It was Ngozi's love that saved me." She had no idea that her sacrifices would soon lead her to the deepest heartbreak of her life. That afternoon in Enugu, the sun was high and the air was heavy. Ngozi had been working non-stop at the small clinic where she assisted, running from one patient to another, making sure everyone else was cared for. But she had not cared for herself. She had skipped meals, ignored her pounding headaches, and pushed through her body's cries for rest. Her mind whispered, just one more hour, just one more task. But her body could take no more. In the middle of helping a patient, her vision blurred, her legs weakened, and before anyone could understand what was happening, Ngozi collapsed to the floor. Shouts filled the room as nurses rushed to her side. They carried her quickly into a ward, placing her on a bed. The doctor checked her pulse, her blood pressure, and finally shook his head with concern. "This woman is exhausted," he said firmly. "Her body has shut down from stress and lack of care. She needs to be kept under observation for at least a night." His words echoed in the room like a warning bell. Ngozi, barely able to lift her head, felt tears sting her eyes. She had been strong for everyone else, but now she could not even stand for herself. With trembling hands, she reached for her phone. The screen blurred as she searched for the one person she thought would understand, her husband. Pressing his name, she held the phone close as it rang. When Obinna finally answered, her weak voice whispered, "Obinna, I'm in the hospital." There was a pause, then his voice came, soft and warm, the way she had always known it. "Ngozi, my love, don't worry. Rest, please. I will come tonight and take you home." Her heart relaxed at those words. For a moment, she forgot the pain in her body. She closed her eyes and imagined him walking through the hospital doors, lifting her bag, holding her hand and saying, "Let's go home." That picture gave her strength. She believed him because she had always believed him. She had given everything for him, and surely tonight, he would show up for her. As the doctor left, she lay quietly, clutching the phone to her chest like a lifeline. Nurses passed by her bed, adjusting her drip, checking her temperature, speaking kindly. But all Ngozi thought about was her husband's promise. She whispered to herself, "Obinna will come. I just have to wait." The evening light began to fade, painting the hospital walls in soft orange. The sounds of families visiting loved ones filled the corridors. Laughter, prayers, and footsteps echoed around her. Ngozi's heart longed to hear her husband's footsteps among them. Weak but hopeful, she sat up slowly, brushing her hair with trembling fingers, preparing herself for his arrival. Her bag was packed neatly at her side. She wore a simple dress, ready to leave as soon as he appeared. Every time a car horn sounded outside, her heart jumped. Every time footsteps approached the ward, her eyes lifted with hope. She told herself again and again, "He promised. He will come tonight." Ngozi had no idea that this night, the night she trusted her husband the most, would become the beginning of her greatest heartbreak. The night in Enugu was quiet, the kind of night where every sound carried in the air. Ngozi sat at the hospital gate, her small bag resting beside her, her dress neatly arranged as if she were about to attend a family gathering. Her heart was full of hope, because Obinna had promised. He had said in that soft voice she trusted so much, "Rest, my love. I'll come tonight and bring you home." Those words kept her warm inside, even though the evening breeze was growing colder. Every time headlights appeared in the distance, her heart leapt. She would rise a little, clutching her bag, ready to see her husband's familiar figure step out of the car. But each time the car passed by, some stopped briefly to drop visitors for other patients, and each time Ngozi's eyes lit up, only to dim again when she realized it wasn't him. She kept telling herself, "He's on the way. Maybe traffic is holding him. Maybe he had one more thing to finish." The nurses passing by noticed her sitting there, dressed and waiting, her eyes fixed on the gate. They whispered to one another, shaking their heads. One of them sighed and said softly, "This woman loves too deeply. But where is her husband?" Ngozi heard the whispers but ignored them. She didn't want to believe anything bad. She held on to her husband's promise like a child holds on to a parent's word. Hours passed. The hospital, once busy with visitors, grew quiet. The sounds of laughter and footsteps faded as families returned home. Ngozi was still there, her body shivering slightly under the cold night air. She rubbed her hands together, pressing them against her chest, trying to stay warm. Her stomach ached from hunger, but she didn't move. What if he arrived the moment she went back inside? She couldn't risk missing him. Her eyes grew heavy, but each time her head dropped, the sound of another car startled her awake. She looked up with hope, only to see strangers passing by. Her heart tightened a little more each time. Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them away quickly. "No," she whispered to herself. "Obinna will come. He promised me." The night stretched longer, and the hope she carried began to weigh heavily on her chest. The cold sank deeper into her bones. Her lips trembled, but still she waited. She remembered how many times she had given up her own comfort for him, how many times she had said, "We are one, I will never leave you." Tonight, all she wanted was for him to keep a simple promise. But Obinna never came. The gate remained empty, the road outside quiet. The stars above shone brightly, mocking her loneliness. Nurses shook their heads sadly, one even covering her mouth to hide her pity as she passed by. Ngozi sat there until her body could no longer fight the exhaustion. Her eyes, swollen with tears, stared into the dark road as the truth began to creep into her heart. She was waiting for someone who was not coming. And in that silence, with the cold night air filling her lungs, Ngozi realized what it truly felt like to be abandoned. The morning after her long, cold wait, Ngozi lay on the thin hospital bed, her eyes heavy from crying. She had tried all night to protect her heart with excuses. Maybe traffic held him. Maybe his car broke down. Maybe something important came up. She told herself anything that could explain why Obinna, the man she had given everything to, never came for her. Even in her pain, she wanted to believe the best about him. But the truth has a way of finding its way to broken hearts. Later that afternoon, as Ngozi sat quietly with her drip beside her, two visitors walked into the ward to greet another patient. They were laughing loudly, their voices carrying across the room. "Yesterday's party was fire," one said, clapping her hands with excitement. "Obinna was the star, dancing, drinking, laughing all night like a king." The other giggled. "Yes-o. That man was the life of the party. He didn't even look like someone with worries. I wonder what kind of wife he has at home." Ngozi's whole body stiffened. The blood drained from her face. She gripped the bedsheet tightly as their words echoed in her ears. "Binna. Party. Dancing. Laughing all night." Her mind spun. She remembered the cold seat by the hospital gate, the way her heart leapt with every passing car, the way she whispered, "He promised. He will come." And now she knew. While she was sitting in the darkness waiting, he was surrounded by lights, music, and friends. Her chest rose and fell heavily. Her lips trembled, but no sound came. She turned her face to the wall so no one would see the tears that began to fall silently down her cheeks. The betrayal was too sharp to hide. It wasn't just that he had failed to come. It was that he had chosen joy without her, laughter without her, life without her, while she lay weak and alone. She thought of all she had given him, the gold necklace she sold, the money she saved and handed to him without question, the meals she skipped so that he could eat, the long nights she prayed for his success. Every piece of her life had been poured into him, and now when she needed just one thing, a hand to hold, a promise to keep, he gave her nothing. With her heart breaking, Ngozi whispered into the quiet ward, her voice trembling like a fragile thread. I gave him my life, he gave me emptiness. Her words hung in the air like a wound no one could heal. The nurse nearby paused, her eyes softening with pity, but she said nothing. Ngozi lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling, her tears slipping silently into her pillow. In that moment, she realized she was not only abandoned, she was forgotten. And that truth cut deeper than any sickness her body had ever known. Ngozi lay in her hospital bed with swollen eyes, her heart heavier than her body. The betrayal of the night before clung to her chest like a stone. She could still hear the laughter of those visitors describing Obinna's joy at the party, and it burned inside her. She had given him everything, yet he had left her to sit alone, waiting like a stranger. Tears rolled down her cheeks again, and no matter how many times she wiped them, more followed. One of the nurses, a kind woman who had been watching her silently for days, finally stepped closer. She spoke gently. Ngozi, you shouldn't carry this pain alone. There is someone I want you to meet. He helps patients who don't have family around. Ngozi didn't answer, but she didn't resist either. She was too weak to argue. A few minutes later, the nurse returned with a tall, gentle-looking man named Chaik. He wasn't dressed like a doctor, just in simple clothes, but his face carried a warmth that seemed to brighten the dull ward. He walked slowly toward her, as if careful not to bring any more pain. When he saw her red eyes, he lowered his head respectfully and said softly, "Good evening, my sister. I came to sit with you if you don't mind." Ngozi looked at him through her tears. She wanted to refuse. After all, the person who was supposed to sit with her had abandoned her, but something in Chaik's voice made her nod slightly. He pulled a chair beside her bed and placed a small food container on the table. "You must eat," he said kindly. "You can't fight sickness on an empty stomach." She stared at the food for a long time before finally tasting it. It was warm, simple rice and stew, but the kindness behind it made it feel like the best meal she had eaten in years. Chaik didn't speak much at first. He just sat there, holding her trembling hand as if to remind her she wasn't invisible. When she began to cry again, he didn't tell her to stop. He simply let her tears fall while he prayed quietly for her healing. For the first time since her collapse, Ngozi felt a flicker of peace. Chaik's presence was not loud, not demanding, just steady like sunlight breaking through dark clouds. She thought to herself, so this is what it feels like to be cared for without condition. That night before leaving, Chaik smiled and told her, "You are not alone, Ngozi. Don't forget that. God still sees you, even when people fail you." His words wrapped around her heart like a soft blanket. As she lay back on her pillow, still weak but calmer than before, she whispered to herself, "I thought my worth ended with him, but maybe I am still worthy of love." For the first time in days, Ngozi closed her eyes and slept without waiting for footsteps that would never come. The day finally came when the doctor said Ngozi was strong enough to leave the hospital. The drip was removed, her medicines were packed, and her file was closed. Yet when the nurse asked, "Who is coming to take you home?" silence filled the room. Ngozi lowered her eyes, ashamed. The truth was painful. Her husband had not visited once. Not a single family member stood at the gate, waiting to carry her bag. She was discharged, but she had no one. Sensing her pain, Chaik stepped forward without hesitation. "Don't worry," he said gently. "You won't go alone. I will walk with you." He picked up her small bag as if it weighed nothing and walked beside her out of the hospital doors. For Ngozi it was bittersweet. She should have been leaving on her husband's arm, but instead, a stranger was the one giving her dignity. When they reached her street, heads turned. Neighbors stood in groups, their eyes sharp with curiosity. Some whispered openly, "Is that not Ngozi? Where is Obinna? Why is another man bringing her home?" Others shook their heads, pity on their faces. Word spread quickly. Ngozi had been in the hospital, and her husband never came. The shame was heavy, but Ngozi lifted her chin and walked quietly, refusing to let tears fall in front of them. Inside her small home, Chaik placed her bag down carefully. "You are safe now," he said, before leaving with a kind smile that gave her more courage than words ever could. When the door closed, Ngozi sat on the edge of the bed, her body weak but her heart awakening. She whispered to herself, "I cannot break here. I must rise again." The following weeks were not easy. Her body was still recovering, and her heart carried wounds deeper than her sickness. But step by step she began to rebuild. She returned to her job at the clinic, moving with quiet determination. This time, her smile was smaller, her trust more guarded. She did her work with focus, pouring her energy into helping patients, but she no longer dreamed of Obina's praise or comfort. Her neighbors noticed the change. They saw a woman who had once lived for her husband's shadow now standing firmly on her own feet. The whispers slowly turned from pity to admiration. "That woman is strong," they said. "She has faced fire, but she is walking through it." At night, when memories of her waiting at the hospital gate tried to crush her, Ngozi would remind herself of one truth: she had survived the worst and was still standing. The husband she had trusted had failed her, but her strength did not end with him. Quietly, without announcing it to the world, Ngozi began to rise again. And though her heart still carried scars, her silence was no longer weakness. It was strength waiting to bloom. Months passed, and slowly, the wounds in Ngozi's heart began to heal. She no longer cried herself to sleep every night. The pain of betrayal was still there, but it no longer ruled her life. Instead, she began to pour her energy into herself, into her work, into her health, and into her future. At the clinic where she worked, her dedication did not go unnoticed. She came earlier than anyone else, stayed late when needed, and treated every patient with kindness that came from her own scars. People often said, "Ngozi does not only treat sickness, she heals hearts." One morning the clinic director called her into the office. With a warm smile he said, "Ngozi, your hard work deserves to be rewarded. From today you are promoted." Tears filled her eyes as she thanked him. It was the first time in a long while she felt truly seen and valued. With the promotion came better pay, and for the first time she allowed herself to dream again. She saved diligently, no longer spending recklessly for anyone else. After months of sacrifice, she surprised herself by buying her first car. The day she drove it into her street, neighbors gathered around, clapping and praising her resilience. The same people who once pitied her now admired her. They whispered, "This woman has suffered, but look how she has risen." Through all this time, Chaik remained by her side, not as a burden, not as a man demanding her love, but as a quiet friend. He checked in on her often, bringing her food sometimes after long shifts, offering prayers when her heart felt heavy, and listening without judgment whenever she needed to speak. Unlike Obina, Chaik never made her feel small or guilty. His presence was steady, like a tree that offered shade without asking for anything in return. Many times neighbors wondered aloud, "Why doesn't she just marry Chaik? He clearly cares for her." But Chaik never rushed her. He understood her wounds were still fresh and that healing takes time. When she thanked him one evening for all his kindness, he simply replied, "Ngozi, you don't owe me anything. Your happiness is enough." And in that moment, she realized something important. She was no longer the broken woman who once sat by the hospital gate, waiting for footsteps that never came. She was now a woman who could stand on her own, with dignity and strength shining brighter than before. Everywhere she went, people greeted her with respect. Mothers told their daughters, "Look at Ngozi, she is proof that a woman can rise again, even after heartbreak." Children smiled when she drove past, calling her Auntie Nurse with the big car. At night, when she sat in her home, she whispered to herself with a small smile, "I thought betrayal would end me, but it became the fire that rebuilt me." Ngozi had risen, not just as a wife, not just as a woman, but as a living symbol of resilience. While Ngozi was quietly rebuilding her life, Obina was busy tearing his own apart. After ignoring his wife's love and wasting her sacrifices, he continued to live recklessly. Nights of drinking, gambling, and chasing after temporary pleasures became his routine. He laughed the loudest at parties, spending money he didn't have just to look important. But life has a way of catching up with those who live without wisdom. One by one, his business deals began to fail. A contract he had bragged about was cancelled. A loan he had taken was recalled with heavy interest. The little savings he had left vanished in a matter of weeks. He tried to hide his struggles behind fine clothes and empty smiles, but the cracks began to show. Soon, creditors started knocking at his door, demanding payment. At first, his so-called friends encouraged him. "Don't worry, Obinna, things will turn around," they said. But as his pockets grew empty, so did their loyalty. The same men who once drank from his bottles and laughed at his jokes began to avoid his calls. When he walked into a bar, the laughter that once welcomed him now fell silent. One by one they disappeared, leaving him to carry his shame alone. The weight of debt grew heavier. His landlord threatened to throw him out. Even his car, which he used to boast about, was seized. He had nothing left but memories of the days when his wife stood by him, selling her jewelry and walking miles just to keep him afloat. One night, sitting in the darkness of his empty room, hunger gnawing at his stomach, Obinna whispered to himself, "Ngozi." Her name tasted bitter on his tongue. He remembered how she had waited at the hospital, how she had looked at him with trust, and how he had betrayed her without mercy. For the first time, guilt stabbed him deeply. He realized she had been his greatest blessing, and he had thrown her away for shallow pleasures. Days later, broken and desperate, Obinna swallowed his pride and went to her street. Neighbors watched in shock as the once proud man, who never respected his wife, now stood at her door, his clothes wrinkled, his face hollow from stress. Some whispered, "So he has finally fallen." Others shook their heads, pitying his downfall. When Ngozi opened the door, he lowered his eyes, unable to meet her gaze. His voice was low and shaky as he said, "Ngozi, please. I need your help." The same man who once left her waiting in the cold, who chose laughter at parties over her tears, was now begging for mercy. Inside, Ngozi's heart trembled, not out of love but from the weight of irony. Life had turned the tables. The man who abandoned her in her weakest moment was now standing in his own weakness, seeking the strength of the woman he betrayed. And as he stood there, desperate and broken, everyone could see, Obinna's fall had only just begun. The day of the community event arrived, and the town hall in Enugu was filled with people. It was a celebration to honor those who had contributed to the community's growth. Drums beat loudly, children danced in colorful clothes, and the smell of food filled the air. Everyone was excited because one of the women being honored that day was Ngozi, the same woman who had once been pitied for her suffering, but who had now risen as a symbol of strength. Ngozi walked into the hall gracefully, her head held high. She wore a simple but elegant dress, her confidence shining brighter than gold. The whispers in the crowd followed her. "That is the nurse who never gave up. She is the one who rose from nothing." People admired her not just for her success, but for the way she carried herself with quiet dignity. But in the back of the hall, Obinna sat, restless and bitter. His own life had crumbled, his debts had swallowed him, and his friends had abandoned him. Seeing Ngozi celebrated made him feel both ashamed and envious. Still, pride pushed him forward. As she sat at the front row, he walked boldly toward her, pulling a chair as though he had every right to sit beside her. He straightened his shoulders, trying to act like the proud husband of a great woman. The crowd murmured. Some shook their heads, others watched in silence. Ngozi kept her composure, though inside she felt the sting of his arrogance. She said nothing, but her silence spoke louder than words. Just then, the community leader took the microphone. Smiling warmly, he raised his voice. "Today, we celebrate a woman whose strength has inspired us all. When her husband failed her, she still stood tall. When she was abandoned, she did not break. She healed herself and she healed others. She is our pride, our sister, our example of resilience." The entire hall erupted in applause. People stood, clapping loudly, cheering for Ngozi. Women ululated, children clapped their hands, and even the elders nodded in respect. All eyes turned to Ngozi, their faces filled with admiration. Obinna, who had just tried to claim a seat beside her, froze. The words, "when her husband failed her," struck him like thunder. The crowd's cheers for Ngozi felt like knives cutting into his pride. He tried to smile, but his lips trembled. Some people glanced at him knowingly, others whispered among themselves. He felt naked under their gaze, exposed for the man he truly was. Ngozi did not gloat, nor did she look at him with anger. She simply smiled humbly at the people, her grace making his shame even heavier. Obinna lowered his head, his once proud shoulders slumping. For the first time, he realized fully that the community no longer saw him as a man to respect. They saw him as the husband who had abandoned his wife when she needed him most. In that hall, Obinna's pride collapsed completely, while Ngozi's dignity shone brighter than ever. The hall was still echoing with applause when the community leader finished his speech. Ngozi stood gracefully, her heart steady, her face calm. Obinna, sitting awkwardly beside her, shifted uncomfortably. He wanted to speak, to claim her as his wife again, but before he could, Ngozi turned to him. Her voice was calm but carried a weight that silenced the room. "Obinna," she said softly yet firmly, "the night I needed you most, you never showed up. I waited at the hospital gate until the stars grew tired, but you never came. That night changed me forever. I no longer wait at gates for anyone." The words cut through the hall like fire. There was no anger in her tone, only truth, spoken with dignity. For a moment, the entire hall went still, as if the air itself was holding its breath. Then suddenly, the crowd erupted. Applause thundered from every corner. People rose to their feet, clapping, cheering, some even shouting her name. Obinna lowered his head, shame burning through him. He had no words left. The man who once believed his wife could never survive without him now sat small and broken, while she stood tall before everyone. He realized, too late, that he had lost more than a wife. He had lost a woman whose worth was greater than gold. Ngozi did not look at him again. She lifted her chin, her steps calm and confident as she walked away, her dress swaying gently. She left the hall not as the abandoned woman she once was, but as a symbol of strength. Her worth now shone brighter than betrayal, and nothing, not even Obinna's regret, could dim her light again.